This is the new Spectre Black Badge, the most powerful Rolls-Royce ever built. And in the case of this one, probably the most purple as well. In this video today, we're going to be finding out how fast it is on an actual racetrack. We're going to be finding out if its new, more aggressive character has ruined its waftability on the road. And we're going to be poking around every nook and cranny of that very colourful interior to find out if this really is a car worth close to £500,000. And we're also going to be talking to the CEO, Chris Brownridge, to find out what this Black Badge business is all about. So like the standard car, we have two electric motors, one on each axle for four-wheel drive, and in normal mode, it produces 577 horsepower. That's the same as the standard Spectre. However, we now have a new Infinity mode. Infinity, by the way, that is the symbol for the Black Badge sub-brand. And when you hit that button on the steering wheel, it unlocks an extra 73 horsepower, taking the total to 650 horsepower. But there's more, because there's also another mode called Spirited mode. This boosts torque from 660 to 793 pounds-feet and is essentially launch control. Yep, launch control in a Rolls-Royce.
The ability to unlock extra performance is said to be inspired by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that powered Spitfires in the Second World War and allowed pilots to call on bursts of extra thrust to escape sticky situations. Anyway, as luck would have it, we have a racetrack to ourselves specifically to put this to the test.
Okay, so Rolls-Royce claim that this car can do 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.1 seconds, so that's 3/10 faster than the standard Spectre, and is frankly outrageous for a car that weighs, well, almost 3 tons. But before we do the full launch control, see if we can get 4.1 seconds, I'm gonna try 0 to 60 just in standard mode. So 577 horsepower, same amount of power as the standard Spectre, and see what we get on this cheap, hastily procured 0 to 60 app I've got here on my phone. So foot on the brake, car in D, and off we go. That is still quite accelerative. 4.4 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Bang on what it should do. That is the claimed 0 to 60 for the standard Spectre, and we had the same amount of power as the standard Spectre. This is all making sense. All right, so here we go. We're gonna stop on the line and we'll try that again. We'll put it in Infinity mode, which unlocks all the power. We'll start our 0 to 60 going. You stomp on the brake, you stomp on the accelerator. It says sprint active. The car starts vibrating and off we go. Yes, my neck is in slightly more pain than it was before, and we've done it in 3.5 seconds apparently. I'm not sure that app's very accurate, but you get the idea. It is faster and it feels all the more extraordinary doing it in a Rolls-Royce because there's just eerie silence. You can actually switch on something called Rolls-Royce sound. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a blast of that now so you can hear what that's like. This is Rolls-Royce sound. So when you accelerate, this kind of whooshy orchestral crescendo, which is actually quite satisfying, but it's much better to have it off. And as I say, you just get this eerie, silent shove and a sense of a lot of mass moving in that direction very quickly. So that's the bit of the video where I show that a very powerful electric car is very fast in a straight line. But seeing as we're on a racetrack, should we go and find some corners?
But before we torture some tyres and burn a few electrons, a few notes on what else has changed under the skin.
As we all know, Rolls-Royce doesn't like to go into too much engineering detail, bit crass and all that, so the only information that's been offered about the chassis changes is that there's a little bit more weight in the steering, they've increased the roll stabilisation, and they've stiffened up the dampers, mainly, they say, to reduce squat under acceleration and dive under braking. Total rubbish or the truth? Let's find out. Okay, so let's just get this out the way nice and early. What Rolls-Royce hasn't done here is turned the Spectre into a Ferrari 12-cylinder rival. This is still a massive, nearly 3-ton EV super coupe, but what they have done is created a car that controls its mass so much better. So let's go through all the different elements first
to tell you what I'm feeling as I lob it around this racetrack. And there's the understeer. You cannot beat physics, especially when the track is wet like this. So we'll start with the steering. Yes, they have added a little bit of weight and you can feel that on the road, but here the steering is pretty numb. The brakes, I have to say, do the job really, really well. But if we were pounding around this track lap after lap, I think eventually they would start to wilt. What I noticed actually was that when I get some proper heat into the brakes, the little centre caps on the wheels steam up. So there we go. If you see a Spectre black badge with steamed up centre caps, you know that they've been having some fun. Okay, so the suspension, what you've got here is active anti-roll stabilisation. So you don't actually have anti-roll bars, you've got very clever dampers. So when it feels you going into a corner, it will tell the outside damper to resist that movement. And as a result, I have to say, it does stay very impressively flat in the corners as I hear a little bit of tyre squeal escaping from underneath me. Poor tyres, poor tyres. The throttle response, well, it's absolutely mighty on the exit of corners. There we go, the car just leaps down the next straight. When you're on the straight, it does tend to run out of puff, like most big EVs do. But the traction on this car is absolutely insane. Yeah, lob it into a tight corner too quickly and you will get understeer, you will start sliding around. But I tried to do a burnout a minute ago with the ESC, everything switched off, and it would not break traction, not even a chirrup from the tyres. I have to say, I am very impressed with the fact that Rolls-Royce has actually let us loose on a racetrack in this car. I can't remember that ever being the case on a Rolls-Royce launch before, but it does show that they've got some serious confidence in the dynamics of this car. So if you absolutely must shave seconds off your journey from your apartment to your yacht in Monaco, this is the EV for you. Next up, time to take a look at the exterior and interior enhancements.
So the first thing to mention is this colour. It's called Vapor Violet, and apparently it's inspired by the pulsating neons of the 80s and 90s club culture. I wouldn't know anything about that because I wasn't doing much pulsating in the 90s, but the point is this whole black badge sub-brand is aimed at a younger audience, one that wants more customization and are more comfortable with wacky colour combinations. So you've got a contrasting black bonnet. The grille round the front is now illuminated. We'll get a shot of that at night, hopefully. You've got 23-inch 5-spoke wheels, forged aluminium they are. And on the inside, unfortunately, you have to actually open your own door when you're getting in. There's an illuminated sill plate down here. And for this next bit, I'm going to actually get in, put my foot on the brake, and this happens.
In here, it's pretty much business as usual. Extremely lucrative business, clearly. You get the new infinity button on the steering wheel to unlock some extra power, and like the standard Spectre, you can order it with twinkling lights not just in the headliner, but the doors too. Plus, there are 5,500 stars on the illuminated fascia, which is quite a lot.
Other than that, you can pretty much have it however you want in here. Carbon fibre, leather, wood, metal. This has some rather fancy carbon fibre trim, lashings of chrome, and then this quite punchy colour combination. This is called Radiant Blue on black with peony pink stitching and Rolls-Royce logos in the headrest. Essentially, when it comes to speccing a Spectre black badge, ignore the taste police. Anything goes.
Right, time to take it on the road for a bit of a waft about.
I'll always remember when Ollie Q came back from the original launch of the standard Spectre, where he'd branded it the best car in the world. And he arrived back at the office looking a little sheepish, worried that he got a bit overexcited. Well, you needn't worry, Ollie, because I think you've nailed it. This car feels like the car a Rolls-Royce always should have been. There's zero vibrations, there's so little noise coming from the outside world and from those run flat tyres, and you've got this bottomless torque. There's just no stress. And I know it's a cliche. It's the biggest cliche in the book, but you feel fresher when you get out of this car
than when you got in. It's basically a recovery chamber. What I love about this driving experience is the fact that it's so simple and uncomplicated. If you want more regen braking, well, there's a B button on your gear selector stalk. There's no extra damper settings, there's no extra steering settings. Even when I select the infinity mode and unlock that extra power and a little sharper throttle response, it doesn't affect the dampers. The character of the car remains the same. And what that means is that this is a car that's been set up by the engineers once, not by some clueless driver who's prodding around with a gazillion different parameters and chassis settings to play with. And what that creates is a product and a brand, a company that feels confident. So where the Spectre Black Badge could have fallen down is if they'd eroded the plushness from the standard Spectre in search of frankly pointless cornering speeds and roll stabilisation, but they haven't. It's still there in bucket loads. Yeah, you've got a couple of extra modes to play with and to impress your mates with when you're grabbing a quick bite at Nobu, and 25-year-old Chinese billionaires will absolutely love that. But the essential Rolls-Royciness of the experience remains fully intact. And that's a very good thing.
Speaking of Rolls-Royciness, we managed to corner the new CEO, Chris Brownridge, who's been in charge of the company for a little over a year.
Chris, thank you for talking
Hi.
to us. Lovely day today.
Beautiful weather.
But an opportunity to use our very nicely weighted Rolls-Royce umbrellas, put them to good use. So, Black Badge, tell us a bit about the Black Badge story. Why is this kind of sub-brand, if you want to call it that, so important to you?
So Black Badge was introduced with the Ghost in 2016, so nearly 10 years ago. And we introduced it because we had a lot of our clients who knew Rolls-Royce well were using our bespoke provision to create their own versions of Rolls-Royces. And we saw a growing trend in our clients where they wanted to perhaps have a different interpretation of luxury, perhaps a more visceral interpretation of Rolls-Royce. And they really wanted more than just aesthetics. They wanted a Rolls-Royce which was different to drive as well. And that's what led us to deliver Black Badge in the Ghost. And of course, Spectre is our latest incarnation, Black Badge Spectre.
Okay, so if you had to describe your typical Black Badge customer, what would they look like? Younger, I assume, but you've probably got a much more sophisticated profile than that.
Well, I think it's fair to say there's no such thing as a typical Rolls-Royce client. They're so very diverse. But you're right, younger, certainly since we introduced Black Badge, the average age of a Rolls-Royce client has reduced quite significantly. But what we can see is that the clients who are attracted to Black Badge are clients who are more interested in perhaps more subversive interpretations of luxury, not traditional luxury. And that's what they particularly love about Black Badge.
So is there a point where you step in, Rolls-Royce, as the taste police and go, no, you can't have that colour combination, it's too much, I don't want my Spirit of Ecstasy on the front of that?
Well, part of the joy of Rolls-Royce isn't just the magnificent motor cars themselves, it's the whole journey of your commission and your experience with us. And of course, when you become a client of Rolls-Royce, you become a member of our family. So we work with every client to bring their dream of their Rolls-Royce to life. And our bespoke program is something which is quite remarkable because the possibilities are only limited by your own imagination. It's the experience of engaging with Rolls-Royce and commissioning your very own Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
And that's why we're extending the factory at Goodwood, the home of Rolls-Royce. So we've got more capacity for these more elaborate and complicated commissions from our clients because we're seeing a significant growth there. In fact, Black Badge and Spectre itself last year was the highest commissioned level car for Rolls-Royce in terms of bespoke.
I'm very confident you're not going to tell me your future product plan, but given the success, the rave reviews of the fact that look, it's kind of the Rolls-Royce that we've all been waiting for. Zero noise, zero vibration. It's the perfect car in terms of refinement. Can you see lots more pure electric Rolls-Royces in your future, or are you going to try and keep that V12 alive for as long as legislation allows?
Well, I'm not going to give all the secrets away right now, but what do we know? What we know is that Charles Rolls said 120 years ago the perfect Rolls-Royce would use an electric powertrain. Spectre is evidence of that, and of course Black Badge Spectre takes it to a higher level. Our clients have told us that as well. Of course, anyone that's driven this motor car will attest to the fact that if any motor car brand works well with electrification, it's Rolls-Royce. It really suits what you expect of a Rolls-Royce, that silence, waftability, the way the car has that ease of driving with that unbelievable surging of power and performance as well. So for us, we're full of confidence about the future. Will we see more electric Rolls-Royces? Of course we will. But of course V12 will continue with us for quite some time too.
Good news on both fronts. And finally then, so you've been in position as CAO just over a year.
That's right,
I
yeah.
believe it is. As we stand today, what's top of that whiteboard in your office?
Okay, so the main priority for me at Rolls-Royce is to continue with our site extension, which we started in my first year as CEO. And the whole purpose of the site extension is to give us more capacity for these remarkable commissions. We need more space for some of the projects that I can't tell you about right now, but also for the commissions that we're getting more and more demand for from our clients. We've opened private offices, which is where we take Goodwood to different parts of the world and have a permanent designer situated near our clients. So we're seeing demand growing for bespoke. So we've got a private office now in Shanghai, in Seoul, New York, and also in Dubai as well as in Goodwood. And of course that's driving that demand, which is why we need the capacity. So that's my top priority. My second priority, and this is something I said to you earlier on, is what happens at Rolls-Royce is really remarkable. And I want to make sure that all of our clients know what really happens at Rolls-Royce. They see the craftsmanship and they see the talent of our people who work so hard to deliver these masterpieces every day.
Well, it sounds like I'm due a visit to Goodwood. I've been there
You're
before,
always welcome.
but not for a number of years. So, Chris, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you very much.